3 days after leaving the Galactic Council, the human fleet gathered at the edge of Vorthon space. 50 ships hung in the darkness between stars, looking tiny against the vast emptiness around them. Each ship was no bigger than a small city block, painted white and blue with Earth's symbol on their sides. Admiral Hyok stood on the bridge of the flagship called Indomitable. He was a short man with kind eyes and hands that had built starships before he learned to command them. Around him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. Everyone knew this might be their last mission, but no one talked about it. Admiral, called Captain Minho from his destroyer Soul's Pride. Long-range sensors are picking up movement. Looks like a Vorthon advance fleet heading for Kepler Colony. Hyok looked at the main screen. Red dots showed enemy positions. 200 ships, each one bigger than his entire flagship. The numbers should have been scary. Instead, he felt excited. Finally, humans would get to show what they could do. How many civilians on Kepler Colony? Hyok asked his intelligence officer. 12 million, sir. Mixed species, mostly families and researchers. Hyok nodded. All ships, this is Admiral Hyok. Today we show the galaxy what humanity can do. Remember, we are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for everyone who has given up hope. Back on Earth, billions of people watched live news feeds from their homes and workplaces. In Seoul, a woman named Gina held her young daughter Suman close as they watched the screen. Minho's face appeared as he spoke to his crew. Is Daddy going to be okay? Suman asked, pointing at her father on the television. Gina's voice shook a little when she answered. Your father is the bravest man in the whole galaxy. He will come home to us. But Gina knew the truth that all military families knew. Sometimes brave people do not come home no matter how much their families love them. In space, the human fleet moved forward. As they got closer to the Vorthons, everyone could see why aliens were so afraid. The enemy ships were not built like human vessels. They were grown, like giant sea creatures made of metal and bone. Each bioship pulsed with sick green light that made human stomachs feel strange. Weapons that looked like huge claws stuck out from their sides. Sweet Mother of God, whispered Lieutenant Taehyun from his fighter cockpit. They look like space monsters. The Vorthon ships moved in perfect formation like a school of deadly fish. Their organic computers calculated the best way to destroy enemies while taking the least damage. For millions of years, this strategy had worked against every species they fought. Admiral Hyok studied the enemy formation on his screen. The Vorthons moved in patterns that made perfect sense if you only cared about efficiency. But humans had learned long ago that perfect sense was not always the best way to win fights. All ships, Hyok said into his microphone. Implement Strategy Phoenix. What happened next surprised even the humans. Instead of flying in neat formations like proper military ships, the human vessels scattered in all directions like a box of marbles dropped on the floor. Some ships dove down, others climbed up. A few spun sideways in ways that made no tactical sense at all. The Vorthon biocomputers tried to predict where the human ships would go next. Every calculation came back with error messages. The humans were not following any known battle plan. They were making up their strategy as they went along. Captain Daeho, flying the corvette Busan Lightning, dove his tiny ship straight through the middle of a Vorthon formation. His point defense guns carved holes in the organic hulls while his ship's computer made micro-jumps that kept him ahead of enemy weapons. This is insane, shouted his weapons officer. We are flying into the middle of them. That is the point, Daeho laughed, spinning his ship in a corkscrew that no sane pilot would attempt. They expect us to be smart, so let us be crazy instead. The Vorthons had fought thousands of species, but they had never seen anything like this. Their ships tried to adjust, but every time they moved to counter one human tactic, the humans switched to something completely different. Captain Wonho, commanding the cruiser Daegu Thunder, found himself surrounded by 6 bioships. Instead of trying to escape, he did something that violated every rule of space combat. He shut off his engines and played dead. The Vorthon ships moved closer to investigate. Their sensors showed no life signs, no engine activity, nothing that suggested a threat. Just as they lowered their guard, Wonho fired every weapon he had at point-blank range. Surprise, he yelled as 3 bioships exploded around him. The battle lasted 18 hours. Human ships that should have been destroyed in minutes kept fighting with damaged engines and broken weapons. When their missiles ran out, they rammed enemy vessels. When their hulls cracked, they vented atmosphere to confuse enemy sensors. Lieutenant Kyung-ho, piloting a fighter with only one working engine, managed to slip inside a bioship's defensive field. He fired his remaining missile into what looked like the creature's brain. The explosion took out not just that ship, but two others connected to it by some kind of neural link. As the hours passed, something amazing happened. The Vorthan formation began to fall apart. Ships that had moved in perfect coordination started making mistakes. Some attacked their own allies by accident. Others froze in place, unable to decide what to do. "Their command structure is breaking down," reported Dr. So-young from the science vessel New Horizon. "I think they cannot handle fighting an enemy that makes no logical sense." Admiral Hayek smiled as he watched another bioship retreat from Captain Jamin's damaged frigate. "That is because logic is not our strong suit. Stubbornness is." When the fighting finally ended, the Vorthan advance fleet was running away as fast as their bioengines could carry them. Behind them floated the wreckage of 37 of their ships. The human fleet had lost 12 vessels, but the remaining ships were already moving to rescue survivors. More importantly, every moment of the battle had been broadcast across the galaxy by automated probe cameras. Every species in the Galactic Council watched as 50 tiny human ships did what entire star fleets had failed to do. They made the Vorthans retreat. On the crystal world of Crystallia Prime, Council Leader Una stood perfectly still for 6 hours, her body cycling through colors that had no names. Finally, she turned bright white, which meant complete shock. On Altaria, Ambassador Taman watched the battle recordings for the 5th time. His scales had turned a color his people called impossible blue, the shade they turned when something happened that should not have been possible. On Earth, crowds filled the streets of every major city. In Seoul, Gina cried with happiness as she watched her husband's ship limp home with half its hull missing, but its crew alive. Little Suman cheered and waved at the television, not really understanding what had happened but knowing it was good. But the celebration was just beginning. Within hours, communication channels across the galaxy buzzed with the same message repeated in thousands of languages. How did they do it? Military academies that had taught the same tactics for millennia suddenly found their textbooks useless. Battle computers that could predict the outcome of any fight crashed when they tried to analyze human tactics. Species that had considered themselves masters of warfare watched the recordings and realized they knew nothing about creative combat. The humans had not just won a battle. They had done something that changed the rules of war itself. They had shown that unpredictability could be more powerful than any weapon, that fighting like you had nothing to lose could beat fighting like you had everything to protect. And somewhere in the deep parts of space, ancient enemy forces that had been watching the galaxy for eons suddenly took notice of this new species that refused to follow the rules. The Vorthans were regrouping, learning, adapting. They would return stronger and smarter, but they would be returning to fight an enemy that had already proven the impossible was just another word for challenge accepted. Admiral Hayek sat in his damaged command chair and smiled. The real war was just beginning, but for the first time in galactic history, someone had shown that the Vorthans could bleed. That was enough to start a revolution. The emergency session of the Galactic Council looked nothing like the calm meeting from a week before. Representatives from thousands of worlds had demanded answers, and the Great Hall buzzed with nervous energy that made the air itself feel electric. Dr. So-young walked to the center of the speaking circle with quiet confidence. She was a small woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. In her hand, she carried a simple data pad that contained information everyone in the galaxy wanted to understand. "You want to know how we won?" she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall speakers. "The answer is simple. You have been fighting the Vorthans the same way for 1,000 years. Same formations, same tactics, same predictable responses to every situation." She activated her data pad, and holographic images of the recent battle filled the air above the assembly. Ships moved like tiny toys, showing how the fight had developed. "Look at this," So-young continued, pointing to the Vorthan formation. Perfect mathematical precision. Every ship in exactly the right place for maximum efficiency. Their biocomputers calculated the best response to every possible human action. She paused and smiled. "Except we did not do any of the possible actions. We did impossible ones instead." Ambassador Taman leaned forward in his seat, his scales shifting to curious green. "You are saying you won through randomness? Pure luck?" "Not randomness," So-young corrected. "Creativity." There is a difference between doing random things and doing unexpected things on purpose. She highlighted Captain Deho's corkscrew attack through the enemy formation. This looks crazy, but it worked because Captain Deho understood something the Vorthons did not. Sometimes the most dangerous place to be is exactly where your enemy thinks you cannot survive. A floating jellyfish creature spoke up, its many eyes blinking in confusion. But this violates every principle of military strategy. You cannot build a defense plan around unpredictability. Why not? So-young asked. You build your plans around predictability, and look how well that worked against the Vorthons before we arrived. The hall fell silent. It was true, and everyone knew it. For centuries, the best military minds in the galaxy had tried to find ways to fight the Vorthons. All their careful planning and advanced technology had failed again and again. Every species here evolved to fill a specific role, So-young continued, walking slowly around the speaking circle. You became experts, masters of your particular strengths. The Altarians became perfect engineers. The Kalari developed incredible psychic abilities. The Crystallines learned to think in pure mathematics. She stopped and looked up at the thousands of watching beings. Humans, we never became masters of anything. We stayed generalists. When we face a problem, we do not rely on one perfect solution. We try everything we can think of, and when that does not work, we make up something new. Council Leader Yuna's crystal body flashed thoughtful blue. Are you suggesting that being less advanced made you more effective? I am suggesting that being flexible made us more effective, So-young replied. When Captain Wanho played dead to trick 6 Vorthon ships, he was not using advanced technology. He was using something much older, the ability to think like his enemy while acting like something they had never seen before. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Species that had never spoken to humans suddenly wanted military advisors. Captain Wanho found himself on Altaria, teaching their best pilots how to fly in chaotic patterns that made their movements impossible to predict. The lessons were not easy. Altarian minds worked like perfect machines, calculating the most efficient path between any 2 points. Teaching them to waste fuel and time on purpose felt like teaching mathematicians that 2 + 2 sometimes equaled 5. No, Wanho said patiently as an Altarian pilot flew his ship in a perfectly smooth curve around an asteroid. You are still thinking like a computer. The Vorthons have computers too, better ones than you. They can predict smooth curves. Do this instead. Wanho took control of his own ship and flew it in a jerky, stuttering path that made no sense from an engineering perspective. He wasted fuel, took longer to reach his destination, and looked like a drunk pilot having mechanical problems. But this is wrong, the Altarian protested. It violates every principle of efficient flight. Exactly, Wanho grinned. That is why it works. Meanwhile, on the Kalari homeworld, Commander Yunbi was having similar problems teaching their warriors hand-to-hand combat. The Kalari were tall, graceful beings with 4 arms and natural telepathic abilities. They fought like dancers, every movement flowing perfectly into the next. Your technique is beautiful, Yunbi told a class of Kalari soldiers. It is also completely predictable. Watch. She demonstrated a simple human boxing combination. Left jab, right cross, left hook. Nothing fancy, nothing elegant, just 3 quick punches that most Kalari could see coming from across the room. Now watch this, Yunbi said. She threw the same combination, but in the middle of the right cross she suddenly switched to a knee strike, then spun into an elbow, then dropped low for a leg sweep. The Kalari warrior she was sparring with ended up on the ground, completely confused about what had just happened. You changed your mind in the middle of the attack, the warrior said, getting back to his feet. How do you train muscle memory for something that has no pattern? You do not train muscle memory, Yunbi explained. You train your brain to make decisions faster than your enemy can react. Every human fighter knows that the best plan is to have no plan at all. But while humans were teaching aliens to fight differently, the Vorthons were learning too. Intelligence reports from the front lines brought disturbing news to General Jihoon's headquarters on Earth. They are adapting faster than we expected, reported Colonel Sunhee, pointing to reconnaissance images on the main screen. Look at these new bioship designs. Extra armor on the sections our fighters targeted. New weapon placements that cover their previous blind spots. More concerning, added Captain Jamin. Their tactics are changing. They are starting to use randomization algorithms in their movement patterns. Not true creativity, but enough variation to make our standard approaches less effective. General Ji-hoon studied the reports with growing worry. The Vorthons were not just fixing their weaknesses. They were trying to copy human unpredictability using their organic computers. If they succeeded, humanity's main advantage would disappear. We need to stay ahead of them, Ji-hoon decided. Send a message to all our commanders. From now on, any tactic that works twice in a row is forbidden. The moment we start becoming predictable, we lose what makes us special. On the front lines, Sergeant Major Kyung-ho was already learning this lesson the hard way. His mixed unit of humans and alien volunteers had just finished defending the mining colony of New Thessaly against a Vorthon raid. The battle had been harder than expected. They knew we were coming, reported Private Do-hyun, checking his rifle's power cell. When I tried the same flanking maneuver that worked last week, they had biodrones waiting for me. Kyung-ho nodded grimly. The enemy learns from every fight just like we do. The difference is they learn by copying what worked before. We learn by figuring out what will work next time. He looked around at his diverse squad, humans, Altarians, Kalari, and even a young crystalline volunteer who had joined them after the battle recordings inspired his entire species. Remember what I always tell you, Kyung-ho said. The moment you start thinking like they expect you to think, you are dead. Stay human, stay unpredictable, stay alive. The phrase "stay human" had become a battle cry across the war zone, not just for human soldiers but for everyone who was learning to fight the Vorthon way, with creativity instead of just technology, with adaptation instead of just preparation. But as the weeks passed, it became clear that something bigger was happening. The war was not just about tactics anymore. Every species that fought alongside humans started to change. They began questioning their own rigid ways of thinking. They started taking risks they had never dared before. The galaxy was learning to think like humans, and once that process started, there was no way to stop it. The Vorthons had faced many enemies before, but they had never faced an enemy that could teach an entire galaxy to become unpredictable. They were about to discover that fighting one creative species was difficult. Fighting 1,000 creative species working together was impossible. But that lesson was still coming. For now, the war continued, and both sides adapted to each other in an escalating dance of move and countermove that would reshape not just military strategy, but the very nature of galactic civilization itself. 6 months into the war, entire star systems had become battlegrounds. The Vorthons, growing more desperate with each defeat, had started using weapons that broke every rule of civilized warfare. Planet-killer viruses, consciousness-eating nanobots, and worse things that made even veteran soldiers sick to think about. On the human colony of New Jeju, Dr. Min-seok worked frantically in his underground laboratory while enemy biospores rained from the sky like deadly snow. Each spore was designed to rewrite the genetic code of any living thing it touched, turning entire populations into mindless Vorthon drones. I need more time, Min-seok shouted over the sound of explosions above them. His hands moved quickly over complex scientific equipment that most people could not even name, let alone understand. Colonel Sun-hee stood guard at the laboratory entrance, her rifle ready to fight anyone who tried to stop the doctor's work. Time is exactly what we do not have, Doctor. Our orbital defenses are failing. The bombardment starts in 20 minutes. Above them, the space battle raged with a fury that could be seen from the planet's surface. Admiral Hyuk had brought every ship he could spare, but the Vorthon fleet attacking New Jeju was 3 times larger than any force humanity had faced before. Sir, Captain Minho reported from his damaged destroyer, we have lost the Seoul's Pride sister ship Busan Thunder. Captain Daeho managed to take 5 bioships with him when his engines exploded. Hyuk closed his eyes for a moment, remembering Daeho's laugh during their first victory. Another good friend gone, another hole in the fleet that could never be filled. Send his family my personal condolences when this is over, Hyuk said quietly. If there was going to be an after this, the Vorthons had learned too much, too quickly. Their new bioships moved with jerky, unpredictable patterns that copied human tactics while keeping their original technological advantages. Worse, they had started coordinating their attacks using something the humans had never seen before, a form of collective intelligence that could adapt in real time. Admiral, called Lieutenant Tae-hyun from his fighter. The big one in the center is doing something weird. It is growing. Tentacles? No, wait, those are communication arrays. I think it is connecting to all the other ships. Hyok looked at his tactical display and felt his stomach drop. The Vorthan fleet was linking up into one giant organism, sharing information and tactics instantly across hundreds of ships. Every lesson they learned from fighting one human vessel immediately became available to every other ship in their fleet. All ships, Hyok ordered. Scatter pattern Delta. Do not let them predict what we are going to do next. But it was already too late. The linked Vorthan fleet began moving like a single creature with 1,000 eyes and 1,000 weapons. Every human ship that tried a new tactic found 5 bioships already waiting for them, ready with the perfect counterattack. Captain Jaemin, commanding the cruiser Incheon Brave, made a desperate decision as 3 bioships cornered him near New Jeju's largest moon. His ship was already heavily damaged, engines failing, weapons running low on power. All hands, this is the captain, Jaemin announced over the ship's communication system. It has been an honor serving with you. Tell our families we died fighting. Sir, his helmsman protested. There has to be another way. Jaemin smiled sadly. Sometimes there is no other way. Sometimes you just have to make sure your death means something. He looked at his tactical officer. Set collision course for the biocarrier. All power to engines. The Incheon Brave accelerated toward the massive Vorthan vessel like a bullet fired from a gun. The bioships tried to stop it, but Jaemin's ship was moving too fast and too unpredictably. At the last second, he fired every remaining weapon directly into the carrier's command center. The explosion that followed could be seen from the planet's surface. The biocarrier and 3 support vessels died in a ball of fire that briefly created a new star in New Jeju's sky. More importantly, the death of the carrier broke the neural link that had connected the entire Vorthan fleet. For exactly 43 seconds, the bioships moved in confusion, their collective intelligence shattered. Captain Wonho used those seconds to destroy 2 more ships before they could reorganize. Lieutenant Kyungho managed to break through their formation and attack their fuel ships. Every human commander used those precious moments to hit the enemy where it hurt most. But 43 seconds was not enough to win the battle. As the Vorthans regrouped, Admiral Hyok realized they had bought something more valuable than time. They had bought Dr. Minseok the chance to finish his work. Deep underground, Minseok stared at his computer screen with eyes that had not slept in 3 days. The genetic code displayed there looked like poetry, written in a language only scientists could read. But hidden in that poetry was humanity's salvation, and possibly its transformation. I have it, he whispered, then louder. I have it, Colonel. I need you to get this information to every human in the system. Emergency broadcast on all frequencies. What is it? Sun-hee asked, not taking her eyes off the corridor where enemy drones might appear at any moment. A retrovirus, Minseok explained rapidly. It enhances the parts of human DNA that make us adaptable, creative, unpredictable. But it does more than that. It creates neural connections between humans that allow us to share tactical information instantly, like the Vorthans do, but without losing our individuality. Sun-hee stared at him. You want to change human genetics? In the middle of a battle? The Vorthans are using biospores to change us into their slaves, Minseok said. This virus will change us into something they cannot predict or control, something they have never faced before. Above them, the orbital bombardment began. Massive energy beams struck the planet's surface, turning mountains into glass and oceans into steam. The Vorthans were not trying to capture New Jeju anymore. They were trying to destroy it completely, along with any humans who might escape to spread their dangerous ideas about creative warfare. Broadcasting now, Sun-hee said, activating her emergency transmitter. All human personnel, prepare for emergency genetic modification protocol. Repeat, this is not a drill. What happened next would be debated by scientists and philosophers for generations. The retrovirus spread through the human population faster than any natural disease, carried by emergency medical nanobots that had been designed to help wounded soldiers. But instead of harming people, it enhanced them. Human reaction times doubled, then tripled. Pattern recognition abilities that had taken evolution millions of years to develop improved in a matter of hours. Most remarkably, humans began to think together while still thinking alone, a form of collective intelligence that had never existed before. Lieutenant Tai Hyun, flying his damaged fighter through a swarm of biodrones, suddenly knew exactly where every enemy ship would be in the next 10 seconds. Not because anyone told him, but because his enhanced mind was connected to every other human in the battle, sharing and processing tactical information faster than any computer. "This is impossible," he laughed, dodging weapons fire that should have destroyed him easily. "I can see the whole battle at once. It is like being inside a video game where I know all the enemy moves before they make them." Captain Wanho felt the change too. His ship moved through the enemy formation like water flowing around rocks. Every maneuver perfectly coordinated with ships he could not even see. "All human vessels," he called out. "I think we just became something new." The Vorthan fleet, which had been dominating the battle moments before, suddenly found itself fighting an enemy that anticipated their every move. Human ships that should have been destroyed continued fighting with perfect coordination. Damaged vessels that should have retreated instead positioned themselves exactly where they could do the most damage. Admiral Hayok, feeling the neural connections linking his mind to every human in the fleet, made a decision that no single person could have calculated, but that their collective intelligence knew was correct. "All ships," he ordered. "Final assault pattern. Let us show them what humans can really do." The last phase of the Battle of New Jeju lasted only 8 minutes, but those 8 minutes changed the course of galactic history. The enhanced human fleet moved like a single organism that thought like 1,000 individuals, each ship perfectly positioned to support the others while maintaining complete tactical flexibility. When the last Vorthan bioship fled the system, they carried with them recordings of something that should not have been possible: an enemy that had evolved during battle, transforming from a scattered group of ships into a unified force that could adapt faster than their most advanced computers. The humans had won, but victory came with a price. They were no longer quite the same species that had left Earth 6 months earlier. They were still human, but they were also something more. And across the galaxy, other species watched the recordings and wondered, if humans could change themselves to become better fighters, what else might they become? What other rules of biology and society might they decide to rewrite? The war was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted in ways that no one, not even the humans themselves, fully understood yet. The final battle happened at a place called the Andromeda Approach, where space itself seemed to bend and twist in ways that hurt to look at. 2 enormous fleets faced each other across a distance that light took minutes to cross. But this was not just a fight between humans and Vorthans anymore. Everything had changed. Admiral Jiwan stood on the bridge of her new flagship, Eternal Soul, watching the largest gathering of ships in galactic history. Human vessels flew alongside Altarian cruisers, Kalari fighters, crystalline science ships, and dozens of other species. Most surprising of all, Vorthan bioships hung in formation with their former enemies. "All ships, this is Admiral Jiwan," she said into her communication device. Her voice reached thousands of vessels from hundreds of different worlds. "Today we do not fight as separate species. Today we fight as one galaxy against an enemy that wants to destroy everything we have ever built or dreamed of." The enemy was not the Vorthans. 3 weeks earlier, long-range sensors had detected something that changed everything anyone thought they knew about the war. The Vorthans had not been conquering the galaxy for fun or profit. They had been running away from something much worse. The Harvester fleet hung in space like a collection of mechanical nightmares. Each ship was the size of a small moon, made from the processed remains of dead civilizations. They had been traveling between galaxies for millions of years, consuming everything in their path and turning it into more ships. More weapons, more hunger. Captain Taehyun, now commanding a joint human-Vorthan vessel called Unity's Edge, opened a communication channel to the bioship flying beside him. "Hive mind designation primary, this is Captain Taehyun. Are you ready for Combined Strike Pattern 7? The response came in perfect Korean, spoken by a collective intelligence that had learned human languages in order to fight alongside them. "Ready, Captain Friend Taehyun. Chaos patterns fully integrated with bioefficiency protocols." It had taken weeks of careful diplomacy and shared battles against smaller Harvester scouts to reach this point. The Vorthans, faced with the destruction of everything they had ever known, had finally agreed to work with the species they had been trying to conquer. The revelation that they were refugees, not invaders, had changed how everyone thought about the war. Harvester ships approaching optimal engagement range and reported. Commander Unbi from the science vessel knew. Hope. Computer analysis suggests they have weapons that can crack planets in half and shields that can stop supernovas. Good thing we are not planning to fight them like a computer would, Admiral Jiwan replied. Around her, the bridge crew worked with calm efficiency. These were humans who had been changed by Dr. Minsok's retrovirus, able to think both individually and collectively at the same time. But they were not the only ones who had changed. Every species in the combined fleet had been learning from humans for months now. Altarian engineers had stopped trying to build perfect ships and started building adaptable ones. Kalari warriors had given up their beautiful, predictable fighting styles for combat techniques that made no sense until they worked perfectly. Even the crystalline beings, who thought in pure mathematics, had learned to appreciate the value of controlled chaos. Their ships now moved in patterns that followed no equation but somehow always ended up in exactly the right place. Enemy fleet is beginning attack formation, called Captain Minho from his position on the fleet's left wing. By all the gods of all the worlds, there are thousands of them. The Harvester fleet was indeed massive beyond imagination. Ships that dwarfed entire space stations moved with mechanical precision, their weapons charging with energies that could be detected from the other side of the galaxy. These machines had destroyed civilizations that made current galactic technology look like stone tools, but they had never fought anything like what they faced today. All ships, Admiral Jiwan ordered, implement Omega Protocol. What happened next was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The combined galactic fleet did not charge forward in neat formations or spread out in defensive patterns. Instead, they began to move like a living thing, flowing, adapting, changing direction for no apparent reason, splitting apart and coming together in ways that followed no military textbook ever written. Human unpredictability merged with Forthon biological efficiency, Altarian engineering precision combined with Kalari psychic intuition. Crystalline mathematical perfection blended with the creative chaos that humans had taught everyone to embrace. The Harvester fleet's ancient computers, designed to counter every known form of warfare, found themselves facing something they had no protocols for. Their predictive algorithms crashed trying to calculate the next move of an enemy that had no single mind to read, no standard tactics to analyze, no predictable responses to counter. Captain Do-yun, flying a fighter that was half human technology and half Forthon bioengineering, dove through a gap in the Harvester defenses that existed for only 3 seconds. His weapons, guided by targeting computers that thought like artists instead of mathematicians, found weak points that should not have existed. "This is impossible," he laughed as his shots punched through armor that had withstood attacks from galaxy-killing superweapons. "Their shields are designed to stop massive energy blasts, not tiny fighters that move like drunken butterflies." The battle raged for hours. Harvester ships that had never been damaged in millions of years of conquest found themselves being taken apart by enemies that attacked from impossible angles, using weapons that should not have worked. Every time the mechanical fleet adapted to one tactic, their opponents switched to something completely different. General Ji-hoon, coordinating ground forces that were preparing to board damaged Harvester vessels, watched the space battle with amazement. "They are fighting like humans now," he said to his aide. "All of them. Every species in our fleet has learned to think creatively under pressure." "Is that good or bad, sir?" the aide asked. "For us? Very good," Ji-hoon replied. "For the Harvesters? Very, very bad." The turning point came when Captain Jamin, commanding a captured Harvester ship that had been reprogrammed by a joint team of humans and crystallines, managed to hack into the enemy fleet's central coordination network. Instead of trying to shut it down, he did something typically human. He filled it with random, contradictory information. Suddenly, Harvester ships began attacking their own allies, convinced they were enemies. Others shut down completely, their computers overwhelmed by data that made no logical sense. The mechanical precision that had been their greatest strength became their weakness when faced with an enemy that had weaponized confusion itself. When the last Harvester ship exploded, the combined fleet found itself floating in space surrounded by debris from the most ancient and powerful enemy the galaxy had ever known. Ships from 100 different worlds celebrated in 100 different ways, but they were all celebrating the same thing. They had won by working together. Admiral Jiwan looked around her bridge at crew members from 6 different species, all of whom had learned to think like humans while remaining true to their own natures. "Send a message to the Galactic Council," she ordered. "The Harvester threat has been eliminated. The galaxy is safe." But she knew that safety was not the most important thing they had accomplished. They had proven that different species could work together not by becoming the same, but by learning from each other's strengths. The old Galactic Council, with its rigid hierarchies and predictable responses, was finished. In its place, something new was being born, a galactic civilization that valued creativity over conformity, adaptation over tradition, and cooperation over competition. 1 year later, former Captain Minho walked with his daughter Sumin through the Unity. Gardens on Earth. Plants from 1,000 worlds grew together in patterns that followed no botanical rules but somehow created beauty that took visitors' breath away. Above them, ships from across the galaxy came and went constantly. Alien children played with human kids, learning games that combined the best ideas from dozens of different cultures. Fourth-hand bioengineers worked alongside Altarian architects to design cities that grew instead of being built. "Dad," Suman asked, "why do the aliens call us the Chaos Bringers? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Minho smiled, watching a young crystalline being teach a group of human children how to think in mathematical poetry while they taught it how to finger paint. "It is a very good thing, little one. We taught the galaxy that sometimes you have to break the rules to save what matters most." "What matters most?" Suman asked. "Each other," Minho said simply. "Taking care of each other, learning from each other, and never giving up on each other no matter how different we might seem." High above them, the stars themselves seemed brighter than before. The galaxy had learned to think like humans, creative, stubborn, hopeful, and utterly unwilling to accept that any problem was too big to solve. The cosmos had indeed been shocked when humanity stepped into the fight. But in the end, it was not human weapons or technology that changed everything. It was the human refusal to believe that anything was impossible, combined with the willingness to teach that belief to anyone who wanted to learn. The universe would never be the same, and for the first time in galactic history, that was exactly what everyone wanted. Admiral Taman stood on the bridge of his ship and watched another planet die. The screens showed red flames covering the surface of Kepler 442b. The planet had been home to 8 million people just 3 days ago. Now it was burning. "Sir, the last evacuation ships are jumping to hyperspace," said Captain Bora from her station. Her voice was tired. They had been running from the enemy for months now. "We saved about 2 million people. The rest," Taman closed his eyes. 6 million dead. Again. This was the 47th planet the Vorthak had destroyed in 3 years. The reptilian aliens showed no mercy. They burned worlds, ate the populations, and moved on to the next system. The Galactic Coalition had been formed to stop threats like this. 47 different alien species had joined together. They had the best technology, the strongest fleets, and the smartest minds in the galaxy. But none of it mattered against the Vorthak. "How many ships do we have left?" Taman asked. Bora checked her computer. 43 battle cruisers, 28 destroyers, and 67 support ships. That's about 30% of what we started with. 3 years ago, they had 500 ships. Now they barely had enough to protect the evacuation fleets. The Vorthak seemed to grow stronger with every battle. Their bioships could heal themselves. Their weapons adapted to whatever the Coalition threw at them. Worst of all, they bred fast and ate everything in their path. "Sir, we have a message from Coalition Command," said Lieutenant Dong Hyun at the communication station. "Put it through." The hologram of Council Leader Zeth appeared in the center of the bridge. The insect-like alien's forearms moved nervously. "Admiral Taman, the Council has made a decision. We are sending a distress call to the humans." Taman frowned. "The humans? The new species from that small planet, Earth?" "Yes. They made contact with us 6 months ago through deep space probes. Their technology seems right different. We have nothing left to lose." The Admiral thought about this. The humans were a young species. They had only just learned to travel faster than light. What could they do that the combined might of 47 advanced civilizations could not? "What exactly are we asking them to do?" Taman asked. "Anything they can. The message will be simple. We are dying. Please help." Seth's image flickered. "Admiral, we estimate 3 weeks before the Vorthak reach our core worlds. If the humans cannot help us, this war is over." The transmission ended. Taman looked out at the burning planet one more time. 3 weeks. Maybe less. "Bora, pull up everything we know about these humans," he ordered. His tactical officer worked at her station. "Not much here, sir. They made first contact through unmanned probes. Very advanced probes, actually. The engineering is strange. Strange how? Everything is built for maximum efficiency. No decoration, no extra parts. Just pure function And their materials science is incredible. These probes traveled through hyperspace for months without any damage. Taman studied the data. The human probes were small, dark, and angular. They looked nothing like the flowing curves of coalition ships or the organic shapes of most alien technology. They looked like weapons. Have they responded to our message? He asked. Dong-hyun checked his systems. Yes, sir. Just came in. Very short message. What does it say? Fleet en route. Hold position. The bridge fell silent. Fleet? How big was this human fleet? And how had they responded so fast? Sir? Bora said quietly. There's something else about those probes. I ran a deep scan on their construction materials. Some of these metals don't exist in our databases, and the energy readings, they were powered by something we don't understand. Taman nodded slowly. Maybe there was hope after all. Or maybe the humans would just be another species for the Vorthak to destroy. 2 days later, the Vorthak found them. The enemy fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a plague of locusts. 3,000 bioships, each one grown rather than built. They pulsed with living light and moved like a school of deadly fish. At their center was the massive command ship known as the World Eater. It was the size of a small moon and had personally consumed dozens of planets. All ships battle formation. Taman ordered. Buy the evacuation fleets as much time as possible. The coalition ships moved into position. They were outnumbered 70-1, but they would fight anyway. It was what they did. The first Vorthak wave hit them like a tsunami. Bioplasma burned through coalition shields. Living torpedoes burrowed into ship hulls and exploded from inside. The enemy ships healed faster than the coalition could damage them. We're losing ships fast, Bora reported. The enemy is adapting to our weapons again. Taman watched his fleet die around him. The Vorthak had learned to counter every weapon, every tactic, every desperate strategy the coalition had tried. They were not just destroying the ships, they were learning from each victory, becoming stronger. Sir, Dong-hyun called out. Something's happening at the edge of the system. The main screen changed to show long-range sensors. 17 massive energy signatures had just appeared out of hyperspace. They were moving toward the battle at incredible speed. The humans? Bora whispered. The new contacts resolved on screen. 17 ships, each one dark and angular like their probes. They were large, bigger than coalition battlecruisers but smaller than the World Eater. They moved in perfect formation, like they had practiced this dance 1,000 times. A transmission came through on all frequencies. The voice was calm, confident, and spoke perfect galactic standard. Coalition forces, this is Admiral Daeho of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. Withdraw to minimum safe distance. We are assuming tactical control of this engagement. Taman stared at the screen. 17 ships against 3,000. It was madness. Admiral Daeho, this is Admiral Taman of the Coalition Defense Force. Sir, you are severely outnumbered. My fleet can support your attack. Negative, Coalition forces. Your weapons will interfere with our targeting systems. Withdraw immediately. We will handle this. The human ships continued their approach. They showed no fear, no hesitation. They moved like predators who had spotted easy prey. Sir, Bora said, their energy readings are off the charts. I've never seen power signatures like this. All coalition ships withdraw to safe distance, Taman ordered reluctantly. Let's see what these humans can do. The coalition fleet pulled back, leaving the 17 human ships alone against the Vorthak swarm. On every coalition bridge, crews watched their sensors in disbelief. What could 17 ships do that 500 could not? They were about to find out. The human ships reached optimal firing range and stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. 3,000 Vorthak bioships faced 17 human vessels in the darkness between stars. Then Admiral Daeho's voice came over the radio again, calm as if he were ordering lunch. All targets marked. Engagement protocols authorized. Estimated elimination time 47 seconds. Taman felt a chill run down his spine. 47 seconds. To destroy 3,000 enemy ships? The humans were either the greatest warriors in the galaxy, or they were about to commit the most spectacular suicide in history. He was about to find out which one it was.